Hi, I'm Lisa Bragg, and welcome to Bragging Rights. So excited to have you here with me today. Now, I started Bragging Rights because I want people to be seen, be heard, and share their value with the world. And I know that so many of you are hidden gems, and you do truly want to step to the stage, whatever stage that is, if it's internal or being the regional expert or being on a bigger stage, and share your expertise with the world. And I really want that to happen with you. And I know that a lot of small business owners want that too, where they want to reach out and touch more people and talk to more people. So joining me today, well, first of all, I want to know, as people join us, where in the world are you from? We've had people from Toronto, where I'm based. A lot of Canadians come on, but we also have people from the UK, and we have people from Sweden and Ireland. So would love to see in the comments today where you're from. And my guest and I want this to be a conversation, so please join in. And so where in the world is my guest? My guest is actually in Florida. Let me have Jeffrey up to the stage. It's Jeffrey Shaw joining me. You're in Florida, right?
I'm in Miami. Yes.
Woohoo! So lucky for you. It's so a little colder
It's
in
a little
Toronto.
warmer here than Toronto.
Now, Jeffrey, you've had a great career. You are a speaker, you are an author, and you're a small business consultant, and you're also an egg salesman. Tell me about that one. I love hearing like people's origin stories and where they got started. What's this egg
Oh
salesman?
my gosh, I love that that's now become part of my description. I have to add to my LinkedIn profile.
Oh, yes.
That'll get people's attention. So, when I was 14 years old, you know, I guess partly driven by probably wanting to make some money, although I don't know that I can recall that being the biggest driver. But I had this idea. I grew up in a small country town, a couple hours north of New York City, which at that time was a very small country town. We shared a phone number with five other families, the party lines of the day. And so although I didn't live on a farm, but I was surrounded by farmland. And I had this idea that I could sell eggs door to door. And it was an interesting community because my family moved there in 1967. And that's significant because there is a startup computer company starting, and this was going to be their worldwide production plant. That startup was IBM. So, right. So IBM is a start. My father was one of the first 90 employees. So you could imagine the scene, right? So IBM buys up this massive amount of land in the middle of nowhere because the land is cheap, but there's no people to work there. So what do? They start recruiting people from New York City, and we moved from Westchester County. So you had a bunch of people that were used to living in much higher populated areas, living in the middle of nowhere. So I had this idea to sell eggs door to door to city people because city people think, oh my God, farm fresh eggs, like how clever. So I was 14 years old. I couldn't drive. So my mother would drive me to a farm on Thursdays, and she'd sit there while I patiently filled up the cardboard cartons with eggs. And I learned, Lisa, you're going to love this. I learned strategically to leave a certain amount of chicken poop on the eggs because I first was cleaning them all off, but then I realized, oh, what makes them authentic, and authenticity in business is important, right? So I started leaving a little bit of the chicken poop on there, just enough to make people wince, but not stop them from wanting to buy eggs from me. So yeah, then I went door to door and sold eggs, and I drove my mother's car. I was 14 years old, didn't have a license, but nobody's going to stop you in the country. I took out a few bushes here and there, but I drove around my town selling eggs, and I did really well. And I ultimately sold the business to another neighborhood kid. So it was actually a real legit business.
Love that as an origin story. So many layers in that, but
Oh
yeah,
my gosh.
add that to your LinkedIn profile for sure. So.
I can honestly say today, everything I know in business became from that egg business. How pricing is arbitrary. Like you can pick any price you want. I charged $1.25 for a dozen eggs, and I have since Googled it. The going rate was 78 cents. So then it's like you can arbitrarily charge whatever you want. You have to get your buyer to understand why they should pay more. So I learned that. I learned, it just, like I said, literally everything I learned in business came from that egg selling business at 14 years old and unpacking what inspires people to buy.
I love that too, because people often really struggle with getting people to pay more. We look so much to our competitors in small
Yeah.
businesses, or when you're self-employed, you look to see what other people are charging, and you think you should. First of all, they copy exactly the wording on their website, so it's copied over and over again, and then they think they should charge the same thing, but it's not apples to oranges or eggs to like we're
Yeah.
selling different things at the end because it's so much part of who we are and that goes
Yeah.
with it. So how do you help people with that
Oh
kind
my
of
God. I love pricing psychology. So here is the honestly here. So I'll give you another framework so you understand how I think about this. So when I set out as a portrait photographer, 36 years ago now, so to give a little context, I have been for 36 years a family portrait photographer for very affluent families. And I didn't start that way. First 3 years, I tried back in that egg selling hometown. I tried being a photographer and completely failed because nobody there was willing to spend more than $9.99 for a pound of photographs. So, but I had bigger dreams because I thought being a photographer is phenomenal, right? I mean, we create things that people hand down from generation to generation. So I realized I needed to work with affluent people. Although I couldn't define what affluence meant, I knew that they were the people that had the discretionary income to invest in what I did. So when I started studying the competition, if you will, I realized that I couldn't even be in that realm because the average photographer was charging about $500 for a photo shoot and some sessions. But when I looked at the math of the business and knowing how much I wanted to, how many sessions I wanted to do a year, how much I felt the market would provide to me in volume. When I looked at it, I'm like, mathematically, I need to get $8,000 to $10,000 a photo shoot here. Right. And other photographers are charging $500. So I'm like, well, how do I justify that? Like, how do I justify charging more for eggs? And I said, well, what if I don't position myself against photographers? I position myself against portrait painters because portrait painters were charging $20,000 to paint a portrait of people's kids. And I'm like, I can get a better likeness. I can create a really high quality look that's beautifully framed, and I can do it for 8 to 10,000. So now to the consumer, I've cut their investment in half. And I'm actually providing something better because it's not a painting that looks like your kids. It's a photograph of your kids that looks like a painting. So the answer to pricing, this is the key, and nobody seems to get that. Nobody seems to teach this. It is, you have to understand, how does your ideal customer see themselves in the world? We all try to price from our perspective. The worst thing you can do is try to price from the perspective of your competitors, because then it's just a shot in the dark. But really the answer is perception and positioning, the two P's. So if you first understand, how does my customer see themselves in the world? Do they see themselves as needing to be budget conscious? Do they see themselves in the world as only deserving of the best, right? Understand, how do they see themselves in the world, and meet them there. Because when it doesn't work is they see themselves in the world as only deserving the best, which is the clientele I was going for. If I came in at pricing that was discount oriented or budget conscious, that's not how they don't see themselves as people needing to go to Costco.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So you have to understand, how do they see themselves in the world? What's the perception you create with your pricing? Because think about, what's the perception we all have if we go to a restaurant that doesn't have prices on the menu? Immediate perception, right? What's your perception at dollar store? It's called dollar store. Like, it couldn't be more obvious what the perception they want, right? So then you decide what's the perception you want to create that matches how your ideal customer sees themselves in the world, and price to position yourself in their lane. And then like I said, if you position yourself in their lane, pricing wise, it's a collision meant in heaven.
Jeffrey, I'm going to bring you back just to talk about pricing psychology, because I
Yeah.
totally think it is like, that is your book. That, I know there's other books on it, but there's so much to that, because we shop from our own wallet, and then actually putting that out there when you're a solopreneur, self-employed, putting it out there, because it's so much on yourself. I love that Martin has joined us, and Martin is saying, encourage your competitors to raise their prices, then you raise yours over and above theirs, and that's what he does. So that's a great tip too, but it's really, stop shopping from your own wallet and make sure that you are shopping from, making sure that you know your client and what they would be. And what are the two P's? Prestige and
Position and perception and position. All right. So
I'm thinking prestige are probably my clients. Maybe that's
exactly.
why, for my bragging rights.
Yeah, understand the perception you want to create and position yourself in your lane. And and to Martin's point, like, the opposite will also happen, right? You wind up doing your competition a favor. Believe me, I did every photographer geographically in the area when I was starting out a favor, because they're like, they never dreamed of getting the amount of money I was getting for what I did. Right. So it works both ways. You wind up opening up the door. But again, thankfully, to some degree. So many people are afraid to do what we're unafraid to do. Right. So, as much as I may have raised the ceiling and did those my so-called competition a favor, very few people are going to be brave enough to actually step up to what they're fully capable of.
That is so true. We play small. People play way smaller than what they should, and playing bigger. So, in your small business consulting and in your book, I read a little bit of your book, and I'm so excited to go and buy it right after the show. But it's really about how do we play bigger and stop limiting ourselves. So, what are some of your tips that you share?
Yeah. So the book, called The Self-Employed Life, what I introduced in that book is what I refer to as the self-employed ecosystem. And when I really, I was inspired to write a book specifically for self-employed business owners because it didn't exist for me. Right. And as often as leaders, right, what do? We try to solve a problem that nobody else is solving. And I realized that nobody's put together, there's so many nuances to being self-employed. And I know you get all of them. And one of those nuances is that we inherently have to run all over the place to get all the pieces we need, right? We hire coaches for our mindset. We go to conferences for trainings. We hire specialists in marketing and in the different parts of it, for all the little different pieces. And then the world accuses us of being all over the place. Like, well, hello. I mean, it's not like we have a marketing department, a finance department all under one roof. We end up running all over the place. So that's an inherent challenge of being self-employed that I'm fully aware of. So I set out to write this book and develop this ecosystem because I realized that when we're self-employed, it's all integrated, right? Business is business. Don't take it personal. It doesn't apply to us. Right. So, and it's not because, and I'm always careful to say, it's not because we're dainty flowers and our feelings get hurt. That's not what I mean. Like when we take it personal, the fact of the matter is I fundamentally believe and have too much evidence to this point that how far you can go and how much you can succeed is contingent on your personal development. So that's why in this ecosystem, 3 elements of the ecosystem are your personal development, business strategies are right sized for a small business, and daily habits that create consistency. I look at personal development and the work that I do with my clients as capacity. Okay, so how can we increase the capacity for the success that you want? How can we increase your capacity so all the hard work that you're naturally putting in has a place to go? And that's one of the big stop blocks, right? Because we put a lot of effort in, but we're like overstuffing a teddy bear. Like, where does it go? Never made that comparison.
That's a good one. Yeah.
But when I look at, right, so capacity. So to your question, what does that mean? Well, that means we need to, here's one of the hardest things I think for a lot of people to step into. Well, actually, I'm going to test it with you. I tried this on social media. I tested this on social media and it was really interesting. I put a post on Facebook and said, okay, if I said to you in a rather aggressive tone, and this is what I'm going to say to you, you're going to get what you deserve. What do you feel?
I actually maybe sweating a little bit. Yeah, my palms a little bit there.
Everybody takes it as a threat, understandably. Yeah. And I said, no, that's actually what I'm saying to you is, no, you're going to get what you deserve, everything you want, everything you deserve in life. And they're like, but you said you'd say it in an aggressive tone. And I was like, why shouldn't we say that every bit as aggressively as a threat? Like, why don't we say to people, you are going to get what you deserve, Lisa, meaning you're going to have your dreams come true. You're going to have the lifestyle you want. Like, why shouldn't we say that with as much conviction as we do a threat?
Yeah, we're so passive about it.
It's really hard. Yeah. So it's really hard. So capacity, it's really hard to get people to step into a sense of what they deserve. How can you welcome everything that you want if you don't open up the capacity of what you deserve?
Yeah, and allow it to come in, but step into all of it. So that's brilliant. And that also, with that, it almost triggers the system a bit more to alert it instead of, you'll get what you want or you'll get the effort you put into it. But when you're aggressive about it, it triggers a system a lot more. So it will land, I think, a lot deeper. So I love that technique. So
Yeah.
if you're listening and you're a coach, there's a new technique for you. So we'd love to have you in the audience to join in. Martin joined in and hear what you're thinking. Any questions for Jeffrey, he's a small business consultant. He's had many businesses that he's grown and done great things with. He's an author and a speaker, so obviously has so many great stories. So we'd love to hear from you in the audience too. I have a lot of people, and I've seen it on social a lot. A lot of the economy, people are doing well. Some people are doing really well, and they're getting a lot of leads coming in that, actually, and this goes back to your right fit client. They're getting a lot of leads that aren't the right fit. They're trying to go for, maybe clients that will pay a lot more money, but they're getting in people who, just want lawn mowing instead of actually a landscape design. And so how do it's signaling, but what do you prescribe to people who come to you for business consulting?
Yeah, and it is going to be an interesting time. And I think, first of all, we always have to recognize anytime there's been a major change in the world, there's a big change in psychology and values, and that can work in our favor or against us, right? So there's going to be a lot of activity in all sorts of directions right now because of a major upheaval, which is why, to me, every business and brand needs to really reconsider their positioning right now to make sure that they realign themselves, because messaging that worked a year ago may not be working today, or it may not be attracting the right people. Okay, so that's one thing. There's just a lot of phonetic energy going on right now that needs to be honed in. But I'm absolutely 100% a huge proponent of the idea of working only exclusively with your ideal customers. Businesses waste way too much time trying to satisfy people that will never be fully satisfied. If you took that same energy and put it towards attracting the ideal customers, like if you shift the energy that so many businesses waste time on trying to convince people either to buy or to satisfy them, if you took that same time and energy you're putting in there and say, well, how do I put it up front? And my solution is brand messaging. That was my previous book. Lingo is a brand messaging strategy. That's the filter. Like, what if you didn't allow people in your business, or you didn't attract people that weren't a fit in the first place? I'll make a human resources comparison, because I actually do a lot of speaking in HR, which was surprising to me because I sold eggs. Like, I've never actually had a traditional job. I get hired to speak in HR, but it's because a lot of event planners get it. Like, when they hear me speak, they get it. And I don't understand, for example, why companies try to solve employee engagement problem from the inside. Why do they try to solve culture problems from the inside? It's like, don't let them into culture in the first place. Like, if you use the right recruiting messaging to only attract employees that are the right fit, the problem on the inside solves itself. It doesn't present itself. And I feel this way about a business. Like, one of the fastest path to exponential growth in any business is honing in on working with your ideal customers, so that you're not wasting time and you're putting energy and how one defines their ideal customer. Yes, it is the profitable customer, but you also have to tap in for you personally. What is the most important for me? I definitely want profitability, but to me, my ideal customer are those that, and especially now as a coach, those that let me do my best work.
Yeah.
Because I want their I want their loyalty, I want their referrals, I want them to love me, I want the world to love me. Who doesn't? What keeps me up at night is feeling like I'm not doing a good job, and I'm way too at a point in my life that I don't need to be kept up at night wondering if I'm doing a good job.
No, dwelling is not a good thing. I think
No.
for me, especially when I started my content business, Media Face, I was really stuck in that whole mindset of I wanted to help everyone so desperately that I can work for everyone. And I would say, oh, here's my number, but I can work within any budget. Well, let me know what you want to do. And then I got so many wrong fit clients that I spent so much time taking care of them and not really serving the people that would write me the check no matter what I would say, because they knew I brought so much tremendous value to what I would do. And so that's where I had to shift, and also go back and shift all of my content that I put out there to say, you know what, I'm not for everyone, and I don't work for any budget anymore. But you start off in that place of scarcity, and it's that
Yeah.
place of abundance. Linda Kern, who I know you know,
Yay,
such a
Linda.
small world, LinkedIn. Linda
Yeah.
Kern, LinkedIn and life, because I know Linda Kern in real life, and you know her in real life, and now we know each other. But Linda brings to the show, what if you inherit a bad culture? That's a great question.
Yeah.
So what if you inherit a bad
Yeah.
culture?
Um, oh gosh. And to that point, I mean, there are a lot of people that are experts in culture, and I'm not going to claim to be one of them because I'm the person who's going to talk more about how to prevent working with the wrong customers in the first place, how to prevent the wrong employees in the first place. So if you inherit a bad culture, you know it's leadership. I mean, leadership has everything to do with culture. And I'm a huge proponent, just simply put, words matter. And I think sometimes we certainly have seen, a lot lately with just the people not appreciating the impact of words, and what a leader says and the tone in which it's said and the actual words have a big impact. And I think it's also, I think what I see when I speak in HR organizations, or if I consult with companies, one of the biggest problems I'm seeing now is that there's a disconnect between what employers think that is important to employees, but it isn't really. And part of it is a generation gap, right? Because let's say, for example, a lot of the employers may be baby boomers, so we have our mindset. But the people they're hiring are millennials, Gen Z. There's a very different mindset. And the goal always, whether it is business owner to customer or employer to employee, it's up to the leader, whether that be the business or the employer. If they want to win, it's up to you to do the work to close that gap. And not the people not your customers, not the ones you're leading. It's not up to them to close that gap. If you're the business owner, if you're the leader, it's up to you to close that gap. To me, you close that gap of communication by getting to understanding their perspective.
Yeah, it's really about your audience. And
Mm-hmm.
then, especially if you're thinking of it, I think of my clients and my customers, my clients as my audience, and then thinking about what their audience needs. And so when you think about that, even if you're thinking about employees, what do they need? What do I need to do to serve them and to communicate clearly to them to bring them to where I want to go? So that's definitely a great
Yeah.
point. I know we're going to run out of time, so I hope you can stay with me because I know we want to
As
talk
long as you
about
need.
a summit. Oh, Linda joins and says it makes sense. So thanks, Linda, for playing along and coming up on the show.
Good.
And Elizabeth joined and said, love the abundance point. So yes, because when we have an abundance mindset, not worrying about scarcity, more stuff, more work, more whatever you want comes to you. And I think it's really also what you mentioned is staying with your values. Who do you really want to work with that you can
Yeah.
serve in the best way? So your book is coming up. You already had a great book. You've had a great career with speaking. You've had this amazing photography business. Why do you, and I ask this from a lot of entrepreneurs and self-employed people, why do you keep stretching? Why not just coast a little bit on where you are? Why do you keep going?
Oh gosh, that's a great question, Lisa. Because don't think the question has to run through my. I had easy sailing as a photographer. Now, I don't. Not that it was easy to initially start, but I have to say, looking back, it clicked and it clicked easily. And it was really profitable for a lot of years. Like, it does seem completely ridiculous. Like, why would you slide from easy street into reinventing yourself as a speaker? And I've thought about it a lot, and I think it is a feeling of completion. And I think if we're going to honor ourselves, we have to honor when we feel complete. And the fact is, I love being a photographer. I still do very little for only my very, 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 very favorite clients that I just am not ready to say no to yet. So I still do very little. I've always loved being a photographer. I will always consider myself a photographer, even if I'm very infrequently picking up a camera. It's so in me. But the fact of the matter is, I also feel complete. I've completed and gone beyond any dream I ever could have had when I set out being a photographer. I'm not someone that's satisfied feeling complete and just writing it out, right? So then we look for our next level, like where can I stretch myself a little further? And for me, it was first becoming a speaker, which was the biggest stretch imaginable because I always identified as being really shy. And I say identified because you find out maybe I'm not as shy as I was identified as. But speaking, and then I wrote my first book 3 years ago, Lingo. I wrote that book sort of as my ticket to a broader audience because was well known in the photo industry as a speaker and a teacher and a trainer and a coach. But I felt like I wanted more impact, stretch again, right? So I wrote a book that was broader to a broader audience. So I don't, kind of wrote right back, Lisa, to the selling of the eggs. As I said early on, I really don't think it was the money that motivated me. What I believe, what motivated me then, I think motivates most of us, is an innate knowing that there's more in us than we're currently living up to. And at 14 years old, I would have described myself as with paralyzing shyness, the biggest geek you'd ever know. I pretty much sheltered in my home. I didn't play with neighborhood kids. This was my desire to, but at the same time, in a quiet moments, I'm like, Jeff, there's more to you than this. Like, I truly believed there was more to me than what I was showing up in the world. So I stretched myself. And I actually think fundamentally, that is why we, as particularly self-employed business owners, that's why we stretch, because we truly believe we have an innate knowing there's more in us than we're currently showing up in the world, and we want to find it.
Yeah. And I believe there's probably a lot more in our audience, and they are also searching for that next step. I talk about it as we're walking on a bridge before it's built. Just keep exploring and pushing up to see what the next level could possibly be. Linda says, well said, there's more in us. Let me read this. You can read it yourself. There's more in us than we even realize. Love it. Thanks for joining, Linda. But you know what? There are those times, especially in this era that we're living in, and it's been a roller coaster. And I talk about a roller coaster a lot. It's been really hard, and it's easy. I can see why a lot of people are saying, let me trade in the self-employed life, the owning a business life, or make somebody else responsible for getting me my paycheck, taking care of HR, taking care of getting supplies for the office or whatever it is. I don't even want to worry about getting work anymore. Was there ever a time that you felt like walking away and saying, not my problem anymore? Have you ever had that?
So most definitely. I mean, but more out of curiosity, not quite as much frustration, because what works against us often can work for us, and I'm ridiculous. I'm stubborn, and that works well for me when it comes to I just don't give up. So I might be stubborn to live with, but I'm also really stubborn in that I don't give up. But the interesting thing is, to your point, and this is why when I wrote my book, The Self-Employed Life, I started it just before the pandemic hit. And I know you were going to mention, we're going to talk about the summit, and the summit actually plays a role in this. That what I could not have imagined when I was writing this book is that we would have gone through this pandemic where millions of people have lost their jobs. The fact of the matter is, and it never occurred to me until I interviewed the CEO of the National Association for the Self-Employed, which I didn't even know existed in the US, but it does. And when I interviewed him about this, he pointed out an obvious point, which is that in times of highest unemployment, the rate of self-employment goes up. Makes perfect sense. So we have far more people that will be seeking self-employment, as well as, and I think about the LinkedIn community, how many people are fortunate enough perhaps to still have their job, but reevaluating their life. They're not sure if they want this job anymore. And maybe they do want to fulfill a dream to be self-employed. So the trend is very much towards self-employment. But have I had those thoughts? At times, but more because of the romance of it, think, oh my gosh, what would it be like? And then anytime I bring it up, my son has looked at me and said, Dad, you're completely unemployable. And he's not wrong, because I just don't know how I don't know how to think that way. I don't know how to take a long time to make a decision. So not overly. I mean, I think what I see, I definitely have had some speaker friends that have opted to take part-time or full-time jobs because the speaking industry has been so decimated. But they're still holding on to that spirit of being self-employed, and maybe it's something they do on the side. Maybe they'll morph back to it. But statistically speaking, the trend is much, much more so towards self-employment, and that's going to grow.
Yeah, it's going to grow. And it's interesting because I know a lot of initiatives, though, are about really young people, Gen Z, become an entrepreneur, solopreneur, self-employed life. Go do it. We're excited. We'll help fund your first year and things like that. But it's actually older people,
Oh,
people
I
in their
love that.
40s and up, who actually enter into being self-employed. So
Yep.
so we need to support more people who are a little bit on the older age continuum too.
100%. I have an entire chapter in my book called Midlife Self-Employment. And I started my own LinkedIn live show, partly inspired by you because I love what you do. And but it's called From Corporate Life to Self-Employed Life, specifically for that reason. And statistically, the highest rate of success, or the average age of the most successful startup businesses is 47.
Oh,
we
okay.
we we think it's the 20-year-olds who hustle. It's like, no, it's the 47-year-olds that have the maturity and the drive. 47 is the average age for the most successful startup businesses. So there you go.
So if you're thinking of starting up your own business, go for it. And you know what? If you're going to do it too, the first year you might get a lot of help. The second year you might need. It's almost like having a kid. The first
So
year everyone
true.
shows up to babysit and help you, and then after a while, no one does. And so it's like
Wow.
you have to take care of it and nurture and grow it, and it does take time. And so that's where you definitely need community. So I think that's a critical piece to it. Now I know you have the summit, and the summit. I'm going to go and buy the book right after the show because what I've read, it's amazing and really connected with me. Even if you have some employees or if you're just starting out, the book will connect with you for sure. So it's called the Self-Employed Summit, and it's coming up. Give us the details and
So
how to
it's
get involved.
so it's April 12th and 13th. So it's coming up real soon. You can register right up till the day before. And it is, as I mentioned earlier, it's a result of once the book was done and the pandemic happened, I realized that, oh my gosh, I wrote this book thinking primarily for people that had been or already self-employed, maybe startups, but I realized it's what the world needs is much bigger than that. So I decided to create this 2-day online training so that we could help people who are currently self-employed, startups, as well as those corporate folks that may be turning to self-employment to get themselves back on their feet. So I called upon there's 10 speakers. I'm one of them. So I called upon 9 of my professional speaker friends that, I mean, Lisa, I literally used my one favor card. Like, I don't think I can ever call upon them again because it's a big ask. These are speakers that command buku money on stages, right? Huge amounts of money. And I'm asking them to do this for free. And they all said yes, every one of them. So it is an amazing, amazing 2 days. So April 12th and 13th, it's complimentary with pre-ordering the book. I just couldn't see do it because honestly, it would be insulting to the speakers to try to put a price tag on their value. And if it was so high, it would defeat the mission of trying to help people get back on their feet. So I decided since the two things were happening at the same time, I collapsed it together. So with pre-ordering the book for $17.95, you have access to world-class speakers.
Yeah, that's exciting. That is so exciting to see. And you're stretching yourself by doing this again, right?
Oh,
So
it's
it's always
insane. My publisher's like, no one does a 2-day online event with 10 speakers 2 weeks before their book launches. Like, no, that's nuts. And I'm like, well, welcome to my world.
So, Jeffrey, what have you learned in this time then? It can be even about how you stretched doing this big event that you have going on, asking for that one extra favor, or it could even be because of this pandemic that you have. What's a really big learning that you've had in the last little while?
Oh, gosh. Can I offer you 2 that might
You
help
can
people
offer us
listening?
as
And
many
all
as
right.
you want.
So
Let's do
the
three.
one thing that I'm seeing from a lot of people, and I love this term came up for me very early in the pandemic as a result of a YouTube video called The Great Realization. And I have embraced what that means through this entire pandemic. Like, we've had the Great Depression, we've had the Great Recession. Like, why shouldn't we have the Great Realization? Like, why shouldn't this be a year when we realize who we are, what's important to us, what our priorities are, what we most value, and how we want to live our lives? So I've used this time to really tap into that. And if you asked me a year ago who I was for, like who I was writing books for, who I was running my podcast for, I would have said, oh, entrepreneurs. But what became really clear to me in this time of realization is that no, I'm for self-employed business owners, and there's a difference, right? I'm for the people that, like me, for 36 years has been self-employed, just doesn't feel like the world is speaking to us. And we're so used to taking the hit on the chin that we just keep doing it instead of getting the help and support. So one thing I've learned is just a level of clarity that I have never known before about who I'm for, what I want to do, which is why I can accomplish so much with such ease, because it's coming from a place of just pure purpose and passion. And then the other thing I will offer, which is maybe not as philosophical as that, but it made a huge difference in my life, and I think this may help some people watching in, is, because I was a photographer and then I went into this industry of speaking, writing books, and all this stuff that we do. I didn't really have a name for the industry I was in. I was in the photo industry. Now I don't know what kind of industry I'm in. Like, it's just a bunch of things to do. And I realized that I'm in the expert industry, right? And here's the freedom that gave me. Because as a creative thinker, I have always fought against a world trying to fit me into a box that was too confining, right? I'm the kid that every teacher was telling to sit still, you move around too much, and as a kid, as an adult, even with a lot of interest, people like, you need to narrow down, and you go into business, you need to pick a niche. Like, I've been fighting against that my whole life. So when I realized I'm in the expert business, there's this weird way in which when you go narrow, you can go broad.
Yeah.
Knowing I'm in the expert business, and I'm like, oh, that means there are multiple audiences I can share my expertise with in many different ways. And I don't have to feel disconnected. I can be a speaker, an author, a photographer, a blogger, a podcast host. I can be all these things and do all these things. But the truth of the matter is, they're just different medium. You're from the media industry. You understand this. Like, they're just different mediums that all point to my area of expertise. So I found that incredibly freeing to actually be able to give a label to this industry, because everybody else wanted to give me a label, like, you're a speaker or you're an author. I'm like, but I'm all those things, but I don't know what to call it all. And I didn't love thought leader because I just don't like the term. Like, one doesn't call themselves a thought leader, and that's not an industry, but expertise is an industry.
It is. That's such a genius moment from you, for sure. So many genius moments.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's really, when I started content in 2007, nobody knew it was called content, when I was trying to put out more journalistic content, and you struggle for these identities because you want to serve and get smaller and smaller and smaller. But that's where you say it's actually broad. And you and I think, like to do lots of different things and come from it that we know we can serve lots of people, but we have to have that lens, that laser focus, to be then able to go wide. So I love that advice from you. I will get in trouble if I don't actually go back earlier in our conversation, because you and I we have so much in common. We both have this thing. We're both against the funnel, the marketing funnel. So let's just tack back to that and have that as one of our almost last questions. But why are you so against it?
What I'm against the energy behind words.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I wrote a book called Lingo, and it goes back to the leadership conversation. We have to, words matter. The energy behind words matter. I mean, you can dramatically shift what you intend to say by how you say it. I love Southerners, and I love the phrase, bless her heart. Like, we know the energy behind that phrase, right? If you take it word for word, doesn't it sound loving? Like, to be blessed sounds loving, but the tone in which it's said dramatically changes its meaning. So tone and words, the choice of words and the choice of tone really matter. And the fact of the matter is, so many words used in business and marketing are inherently uncomfortable to self-employed and small business owners. Companies can toss out these terms, marketing funnel, target audience, and everybody's just, but when I think, it's like, the last thing I want to do is think of my audience as a target.
Yeah.
Like, it energetically just isn't wrong for me. So the whole marketing funnel has always bothered me. I'm like, if you just take the visual of it, right? It appears that you're wide open and open-hearted and open to all at the top, but it's like this scheming way that you're going to get them to get closer and closer and squeeze them through a small hole in the bottom. Like, it energetically looks wrong.
Yeah.
So I created in this book, which is something I've been struggling for, like, what does this look like to me? And I realized what it looks like to me is a hug. And I call it hug marketing. So it's a series of concentric circles. And the innermost circle is surrounded by all the other circles. And that's why it's called hug marketing. It's like the goal is to get to the relationship level with your clients that if you were to see them in person, you would hug them when it's safe to hug again, which is soon. But I also like the shifting of responsibility. So instead of it becoming, how do I cleverly get people to walk through a funnel, it becomes, what responsibility do I take as a business to take people from the outermost circles to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, with the goal of being that it's going to be such a solid relationship that it will be a hug. The hug is in the center. The ring around that is the client. And that's the other thing that I really want to point out. Why do so many businesses stop at client acquisition?
Yeah.
Right? Why do they leave so much money on the table? Because they're not nurturing that relationship so that the client is a loyal customer and comes back or tells their friends, because those are the people that you would hug.
Yeah, you want to hug them, and then they're your ambassadors. So, Linda joins and says, many of the terms of business seem to be drawn from the military. And it's really almost against this world that we're going into right now, which is much more feminine. We're not just shopping from here, we're moving to our heart and moving
100%.
to our gut and being much more intuitive, and also making sure that we show our values to the world. People are demanding that, clients are demanding that, other businesses want to see where you stand on things too. And so we can't use those terms, especially in this world that we live in right now, where targets are really not, the language is just not there.
Yep.
So, and Linda loves your hug marketing. So I use the infinity loop, but very similar, where we want to keep them with us.
Yeah.
And in the middle, we want those people, the goal is that they'll become our ambassadors, because then they'll share the love even further. And it makes our job so much easier that we can get out there and share more value with the world. So, okay. And I know you want to share more value with the world. So the summit is coming up. It's coming up on the 12th, you said?
April 12th and 13th. Yep.
Okay, and I'll put that in the link in below. So thank you so much for Jeffrey for joining me, and good luck with your book launch. And I can't wait to see you at the summit.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. I love sitting down, John. I love that we are. Hey, why do we connect so well? Because we have an alignment of values, and that's everything. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the show notes. Jeffrey and I will come back and look at your comments on LinkedIn from time to time, and we hope you watch the replay. Okay, take care. Have a great day. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.